A few weeks back, I preached at Toowoomba Church, and through the prayer, the person who was actually praying for the preacher actually, asked God to be with her. That was me. And I felt really bad for him when I got up the front and he realised I was actually a male. He couldn't have sunk any lower in his chair, the poor guy. But the family unit is changing these days. It's the modern family world, I guess, like the TV show, where within a family it used to be so simple. You'd have a mum, you'd have a dad, you'd have 2-point-whatever kids. This day and age there can be people out there who have 2 dads, 2 mums, stepmum, stepdad, grandparents have raised them, foster people, adopted parents. But it's still so core to our biblical belief because in the Bible it constantly talks to us about our Heavenly Father. Talks to us about the family unit all the time. I guess fathers don't always get the best rap because statistically, 1/3 of us sitting here today won't have been brought up with a father in our household. I guess when things go wrong in a family unit, if there's abuse, if there's other things, 98% of the time, it's the father. And yet going back into biblical times, it was the father who the Bible most likely points to when relating them to Jesus. I guess for me, it was a couple of weeks ago we had Father's Day. And Father's Day for me, this was my second Father's Day. And wrongly I assumed that every Father's Day you'd get a more expensive present. I was wrong about that. But I know Bill Cosby once said in one of his books, he said, Father's Day, it's just like Mother's Day, except without the presents. Is pretty... No, it's not completely true. I got a little present. I'll pay for that, I know. It's okay. I started to think, it was around Father's Day, and I started to think about how life had changed for me, having a daughter. How life had changed being a father now. How that helped my experience with God. How that had helped my experience with my wife in my marriage. And I started to look through the Bible for stories of great fathers. And if I said to you, name some great fathers in the Bible, you might start sprouting off some of the big names, the Abrahams, the Davids, of the world. And I went back and I reread these stories of these great fathers from the Bible. And these guys are seriously messed up. You go through the stories of fathers in the Bible and you've got David he raises his sons so badly that they're so spoilt they end up trying to kill him to take over his throne. You've got Noah who does unmentionables and Lot with his kids. You've got Abraham who tries killing one and sends the other one off into the desert for eternity. I start to look at it and go, these guys, maybe being a father wasn't as easy as what it seemed when it first started. I came across Mark 5:21. You can open this up. It's a story in the Bible. It's a brilliant story about a father. It's a story about a man called Jairus. It's about a story of his courageousness for his daughter. Mark 5:21-24. Now when Jesus had crossed again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered with him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came out, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet, and he begged earnestly, saying, "My daughter, she lies at the point of death. Come, lay your hands on her, that she may be healed and that she will live." So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged around him. And it was during this part of the story, if you remember, the woman who'd been bleeding for 12 years of her life came, and in the scuffle around Jesus, touched Jesus' garment. It's where Jesus looked down and said, "Who touched me?" And his disciples went, "Yo, Jesus, you're crazy, man. There's 100 people around here who's touched you." "No, who touched me?" This story inside of it delays Jesus. From Jairus coming to Jesus and saying to him, Jesus, my daughter, she is dying. I need help, please. There was this delay in the story because of this woman who came and needed Jesus' help then and there. While he was still talking, some people came from the leader's house, from Jairus' house. And they told him that his daughter had already passed away. It was too late and to stop bothering Jesus. As soon as Jesus had heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Don't be afraid, just believe." And he permitted no one except himself to follow him into the house. When he came, he said to them, "What makes this commotion? What makes you weep? The child is not dead, she is sleeping." The people around him ridiculed him, and when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child, those who were with him, and entered to where the child was lying. He took the child by the hand, and he said to her, "Talitha kumai," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately she arose and walked around, for she was 12 years of age, and they were overcome with great amazement. He was a father. He was a synagogue leader. This is in a time where Jesus was trying to be persecuted for being the Son of God. The people who were persecuting Jesus were these same synagogue leaders. Here is a man who went against everything he was meant to do to go and see Jesus, this rebel, this lunatic, because he knew that if he could just get to him, he may be able to save his daughter. He risked life, limb, his job, his place in the hierarchy of society, everything, for the chance of his daughter. Last year, I think it was, some of the guys here from Springwood, we went and saw a movie to raise some money for a charity, but the movie was called Courageous. It was a story about 4 men, police officers, who were brilliant about their job through the day, being police officers, but their family life had suffered. They weren't there for the kids, they weren't there for their sons and their daughters and their wives. They made this pact after tragedy struck the family that they would make a resolution together, that these men would resolve to be better fathers. And to do that, they would connect to God. That was their primary purpose. Connect to God first, connect to their kids. For me, growing up, I was pretty lucky. I had a father who was there, who lived with me my whole life till he kicked me out of home. He was somebody who taught me respect of women, respect to other people. He taught me, in my eyes, what it was to be a father, to be a husband, and to be a man. You can remember as kids, you would grow up, you would think your dad was absolutely invincible, didn't you? I mean, you know, as kids, and I see Ellie today, my daughter, they'll climb up and they'll jump stupidly into your arms thinking that you'll catch them every time. I don't want to tell her, there's a chance I could drop you. You know, I've dropped some footballs in my time too, but growing up, you know, I can remember standing there. I went to Wynnum Church, and there was this tree out the front of Wynnum Church. We weren't allowed to climb it, really. But I can remember there were times that my brother and I, we would climb this tree. Dad would stand below, and we would jump. Never once can I remember ever thinking, he's going to drop me. What am I doing? This is stupid. And from memory, I can't remember him dropping me, although I guess if he had, I wouldn't have remembered anyway. But this was something that I thought Dad was just absolutely invincible. I can remember getting into trouble at home, and in our house, if there was bad cop, good cop, Mum was definitely the bad cop, Dad was definitely the good cop. Mum was the one who would dole out the punishments, as she would see that it fitted the crime. And I can remember Dad was the peacemaker. So my job in a day, if I'd been, according to Mum, bad, and I deserved to be punished, my one job through that day was to get to Dad when he got home from work before Mum did. I had to plead my case before he was tainted by Mum's view. Of course, most of my arguments would run up to Dad and obviously tell him that my brother had done it. That was always a good argument. And most of the time that actually worked quite well. I can remember Dad would go inside and he would have a chat with Mum. They would sometimes go to the bedroom and shut the door. You knew it was never good when court was in session. And they would be in there having a little chat and they would come out and you'd be waiting expectantly as to whether or not you're going to get grounded or smacked. Don't tell anyone. And I would say probably 99% of the time that Dad came back out of that room, he had sided with my mother. Now, I never really understood this concept until I got married. Since that point of time, siding with the mother seems like a really good plan. And Jeremy, who's getting married on Monday, that would be a really wise point to remember. There were awkward moments growing up with Dad. You know, there would the birds and the bees talk. You know, who loved having those with their parents? And if those of you haven't had it with your parents yet, you're in for a treat. Now, I can remember when Dad started to talk to me about this, talking to me about girls and sex and all of this, there is no place in the world I didn't want to be except... And when things got just a little bit too much, he pulled out the good old Adventist book of wisdom. That's right. That there was a book for parenting right there. That there just took all the awkwardness away somehow. Here's your book, go read it. I can remember I was even really bad one time. We were in the ABC back when I was at the conference office. And it was there where the boardroom is now. And in the very back corner, they had all these books. This young teenage boy, you'd sneak in there and you'd be really bad and you'd read the everything a teenage girl should know just to see what the other side was seeing. As I was growing up as well, and I guess this is more of a personal note for me, I was a young boy who, and I'm sure the guys will read me about this later, I used to wet the bed as a young boy. I know, so embarrassing. But what was worse at the time was it meant that I could never go on school camps as a young guy, or have sleepovers or stuff like that because of the fear of embarrassment. And so my dad would come on every single school outing. The kids must have thought, wow, he's really into it. He would never say anything as to why. He was there for me. He was there to stop me from being embarrassed. So every camp, every overnight stay, Dad would be there. He'd be one of those parents who were just everywhere for you. I can remember this one trip we went to Sydney. This was I think it might have been the Year 7 trip. You know, all Adventist schools seem to do these trips down to different churches and to Avondale and to see around the place. And I can remember Dad was on the trip again. I really didn't want him there. I mean, you know, I'm 12, 13 years of age. There's only one thing on my mind, and that was girls. Having your dad there is not conducive to girls. And the teachers, in all of their wisdom this morning, decided to go to McDonald's to have breakfast on the way down in the bus. For us, this was a fairly big treat. I mean, McDonald's was not a place that good Adventist vegetarians often went to eat, and you didn't want to get seen, and Mum worked at the conference office and thought she'd get fired. And so when the teachers said we're going to Macca's for breakfast, it was on. Now, being this young boy of almost 13, all of my friends and I decided that the cool way to impress the girls was to have an eating contest. Who could eat the most? Now, I mean, they were cheese and egg burgers. There was no meat, obviously. And we had hash browns and we had milkshakes and orange juice and we ate. Boy, did we eat. It felt like it was Sizzler. I don't know how many times I had to go back to Dad to ask for more money, but we just ate and ate and ate. I can't remember who won. Probably no one, really. We got back on that bus. And we're driving down the road. And sometime later, I realised I just wasn't feeling the best. I don't know where those 9 or 10 cheese and egg burgers had gone, but they didn't feel too stable. And I can remember seeing Dad, who was sitting like such a good father, down the back of the bus, staying out of my way, staying away from the girls I was around. And I got up quietly from my chair and started walking slowly and started running back to him. And I kid you not, without a word of a lie, before I'd gotten out 3 words, Dad, I feel I covered him. Head to toe. Thank you, Dad. The things fathers do for you. He was there. He was there for me. And it completely, I guess, shaped who I became. There were rough times too growing up. I guess on this weekend especially remember, but I remember when my mum passed away when she was young. I can remember the closeness that Dad and I and my brother found. That communion around a tragedy. It was the closest I've ever felt to my dad, without question. It was a way that we were able to connect. He didn't want to have that way there, but it worked. But then that brought problems moving forward, I guess. To see my dad move on with his life. To see him fall in love again. To merge with a step family down the track. These all brought their issues between a son and a father. The problems. But you get through this and you end up with a family who you love to death. A step family who you love to death. A father who you respect even more. And then into your life comes another fatherly beast. The father-in-law. Now, for those of you who know Peter Bacon, who has been here at Springwood for quite some time, he's a great man, I have to say that. And if I asked you what was one of the best traits about Peter Bacon, I would say it's his willingness to help. It's his willingness. If you've ever asked for a trailer, you'll get his trailer. You'll also get Pete helping as well. If you need something done, you ask him and he's there. I'm happy to give out his phone number if anyone needs anything. But I tell you what, some of the scariest times in my life, and he'd never made me feel nasty or horrible or anything like that, but that day where I walked into Carol and Pete's house with that ring in that box, asking them if I was allowed to ask their daughter to marry me. I hadn't even been dating Emma that long. I was petrified. Talk about a time for a nervous wee, that was it right there. Before I'd even gotten the words out of my mouth holding this ring up, Pete came over and gave me this huge hug, crying. I thought to myself, what have I gotten myself into? But then you start to realise that you're going to be taking away his little girl. The daughter that he has cared for and protected for so long in his life. And all of a sudden you start to maybe feel a little bit more inadequate as a husband. See, I'm not really a hands-on kind of guy. Like my father and father-in-law, I can't build a car from scratch. I couldn't erect a house by myself in 3 weeks. I can't change a tyre on a car quicker than the Red Bull Formula One team. These are all things they can do. And it didn't help with the inadequacy feelings when at 7 o'clock in the morning you'd hear somebody mowing your front lawn and it was your father-in-law. Or to have him... oh man, I'm in trouble. Or to have him come over and paint your house for you. Or to put up fences, or to get cars serviced and fixed. And my wife cottoned on pretty quick that her husband could feel a bit inadequate about this, because normally it would be, oh, my car's broken, I'll give Dad a call. Smart woman, I wouldn't have known where to start. But I could have called somebody, surely. But at some point in my relationship with my wife, I had to work out how I was going to make this work with a man who I loved so dearly. And I realised after a while, just let him help. Where's the downside? Kick back, read a book, call him over, get him to do stuff. He feels like he's helping, I feel like I don't have to do anything, Em's happy, it's a good life. But these relationships that we have with these people who we love, who have shaped our lives, these fathers. You may never have had a father or a father-in-law growing up, and maybe the lack of them in your life has shaped you. But for me, these two men are shaping the person I am and the husband and the father I'm going to be to my daughter. Psalms, there's a bunch of Bible verses about fathers. Psalms 103:13 says, just like a father has compassion for his children, God has compassion on those who respect him. Proverbs 3:11, don't despise God for letting you know that you've done wrong. He disciplines you because he loves you, just like a loving father does to his children. I like this one. Ephesians 4:6, fathers, don't annoy your children. Instead, bring them up to love the Lord. I really could have used that one growing up with Dad. Anyway. Colossians 3:21, fathers, don't alienate your children. They will become discouraged. But parents aren't perfect. Being a father now, I realise more and more as Ellie gets older and older how imperfect we parents can be. When you seem to think that you have no patience left in your life. When your little daughter is holding there and you just want to love her and she's just hitting your face for no good reason as far as you can tell. And you look at her and go, just one punch, girl, one more. But then it's the cuddles, cuddles, she wants cuddles and everything's okay again. Or the stage where you go through where they're biting you and absolutely everything in sight. And your wife will come out of her bedroom one day and she's got bite marks on her face and her shoulders and arms and... I love my wife, and I would say that even if she wasn't here. I chose her. Well, technically she chose me, but we chose each other. We knew who we were when we made that commitment to each other. Having a child was so different. I couldn't tell what she was going to come out to be like. What if she had more bacon in her than Justin's? Could I still love her? What if she looked like me and not Em? What if she had my personality and not Em's? These are all the unknowns because you don't get a say. But you look down at that child and it doesn't matter. But where in parenting, I went to all the classes. I've read the books. Okay, I was given the books by my wife. I've read some of them. And you start to read about other people's experiences, about being a father, about being a dad. And nowhere in those books does it ever tell you how bad a dad you're going to have to be. The lies that you tell. I hate tomato, passionately hate the stuff. And my little daughter is sitting there and she's eating this tomato. Yum, 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 she says. Daddy want some? Sure, love it. And you drop it on the floor quickly and pretend to eat it. Or then she goes over and for the 50th time that day, she wants to watch the Wiggles. And she's like, hey, this is great. And you're like, yeah, this is fantastic. You're lying through your teeth to an 18-month-old girl. Or when she comes out dressing herself from the wardrobe and she's got on just the worst clothing combinations ever. And you look down at her and you go, you look beautiful. She doesn't, but she's gorgeous. This is parenting that no one ever tells you about, being a dad and having to lie to your daughter from such an early age. I have other failings, I guess, being a dad. I take the 10 Commandments literally, and when Jesus says 6 days you shall work, I do that. I have my own business. I don't get to be there at home too often. I have to travel. These are things I'm sure my wife would love to change about me and my time being around Ellie. It is how it is. But nothing beats coming home from a trip and having your daughter run out, especially now that she can actually say daddy, running up to you and going daddy and holding her arms up. But I fail with her. I don't give her enough time and enough attention. And it's something that I know I'm going to struggle with for ages. If God loves us as our Heavenly Father, as much as you who are out there who are parents, look down at your child when they're born. Look down at your child when they grow up and get older. As a human father, I feel like I physically cannot give any more love when I look at my daughter. But if God, who is perfect, sees us as his children, how much do we mean to him? How much does he sorrow when we sorrow? How much does he laugh when we laugh? If I giggle at my daughter for doing something stupid and crazy, how much more is he up there enjoying the fruits of his labour? For Emma and I, we tried for years to have children. It was a pretty tough road. And through all the trials and the doctors and the miscarriages and everything that went on, as I'm sure there are many of you out here who are experiencing the same thing, you wondered, why not us? Why couldn't we be given that miracle? And then out of the blue, literally, unexpectedly, you get that miracle. It starts to become so much more clear. My relationship with God completely changed by having that girl. I guess like Jairus in the Bible, having to connect with Jesus to try and be the best father you can be will change you. You may not have kids, you may be young, you may be just married, you may be getting married. You may not want kids. But all of us have had parents in some way, shape or form. People who have raised us. Those people have cared for us, have loved us. How much more is Jesus going to love us than those people? If you want to open your Bibles, my last verse here is Mark 5:36. It was in the story there, and it's one of my favourite verses that Jesus actually says to a father. And Jesus said to him, he heard the word that was spoken. He said to the ruler of the synagogue, don't be afraid, believe. In another translation, Jesus says to Jairus, don't listen to them, just trust me. This is Jesus talking to a father and his concern for his child. If how I feel about my daughter is just a smidgen of a reflection on how Jesus sees you, then we're in pretty good hands.